What was the worst experience you had in elementary school? I was running around the playground, saw a couple of girls with a small milk carton between them, ran through and kicked it. Turns out they had a pet hamster or squirrel in it. I killed the pet right in front of them. I felt bad about that for my whole life, and I'm 54 now. My father did that. I'd just gotten a hamster and it was rolling around in one of those balls while we put the cage together. He came home from work and thought I got a sports ball or something and happily kicked it at me. I got a new hamster. Wanna play sports ball, son? Why would someone put a hamster inside a milk carton? They're just kids. They wanted to carry it around and figured that'd be fine. I was bullied a lot and also had a bad haircut. One day in class, all of us students were sitting in a line while the teacher spoke. Halfway through, the teacher stopped talking. He walked up to me and pulled on my hair, saying, "Is this for real?" He then erupted with laughter, and so did the rest of the class. As they all laughed at me, I felt mortified. I wanted to die. I will never forget that moment. I had terrible, terrible hair throughout my childhood at all different stages. And I had this happen in various situations where the teacher would add to how terrible it was by constantly questioning my hair and bringing attention to it during class in front of the other classmates. They allowed me to be constantly bullied by my classmates in front of them without doing a darn thing. I remember when I was in the 4th grade, my mum gave me my brother's lunch by accident. I asked if I could go to his classroom so we could swap. I knocked on the door and asked for him. At the time, I had very short, curly hair. My mother made me get it all cut off as I had head lice that she couldn't get rid of. I'm female. After I asked for him, a little boy asked, "Are you a girl or a boy?" The entire class erupted with laughter and pointed at me, most loudly the teacher, who was in hysterics. He just kept laughing too. I walked out and waited for my brother to come while I could hear them in the background. It was mortifying. Another time, my mum took me to a clothes shop where she knew the owner. He invited me out back as his sons were there with their pet mice. I spent about 30 minutes with them and we went to leave and he said, "You have a lovely son." Oh well, I'm a somewhat attractive woman now and the teacher who laughed at me was fired for his inappropriate behavior with students later. Sometimes karma is slow for people who have a rough time in school, if it happens at all. Glad things worked out for this nice lady. In 2nd grade, we sat at desks arranged in groups of 4 with 2 pairs of desks facing each other. I was grasping the front edge of the desk and this kid slammed his desk against my fingers. Not sure if it was intentional, but it really hurt. I started crying. The teacher noticed and instead of dealing with the situation in a sane way befitting a 2nd grade teacher, her punishment for the boy was to have me slam my desk against his fingers. I told her it was okay because what the frick, I really didn't want to do that, but she made me do it anyway. She was a terrible teacher. Damn, that's pretty effed up and traumatizing for a 2nd grader. What happened to her? Is she still around? I remember her being pretty old, so she's probably retired or dead by now. I loaded my pants in kindergarten. Then I stepped on it. Then I proceeded to walk it around the classroom. When asked if I did it, I denied the act even though the footprints led to me and my pants smelled pretty bad. I got sent home. Many of those kids probably don't remember, but some nights I lie in bed thinking about what might have been if I just went to the bathroom. I work in an elementary school now. A few years ago, one of the kindergarten teachers pulled me aside and told me, "I have a pooper in my class. I can't figure out who it is." Somehow, someone who didn't wear underwear with their pants was relieving themselves, and the logs were falling out of the leg pants and onto the floor. This was causing her stress because some kids would accidentally step in it and shred it around the classroom, making a mess. A few days later, the teacher was walking down the hall and catches my eye. She seemed less stressed than the previous couple of days. She came over to me and said, "So, I found the poopatrator today." It was as if he had no idea he was doing it. In other words, your experience isn't unheard of. I got really sick once. My mother sent me to school despite the fact that I felt awful. I walked into the bathroom, spewed all over the floor, and then proceeded to crap my pants. I locked myself in a stall until the teacher came, cleaned me up, and brought me to the nurse. One day as a child, I woke up feeling sick. Mum sends me to school anyway. I get there, immediately go to the nurse's office. They refuse to examine me without a pass from my teacher. I go across the building to my first class to get one, by which point I'm late. The teacher refuses to let me into the room without a pass from the principal's office. I go back across the building, spend a few minutes waiting in a crowd of fellow late students, go back to class, give teacher his pass, go back to the nurse's office, give nurse her pass, nurse examines me, immediately declares me highly contagious, and sends me back home. You're a lucky mother fricker. My mom forced me to go to school and I was sick with the flu. I felt sick and in the middle of class I silently threw up on my desk. I covered it for 15 minutes. When class ended, everyone left and the teacher confronted me, asking me what was wrong. I raised my head to have spew coming off my face and shirt. She starts gagging and I ran for the bathroom, leaving trails of spew. Worst day ever. There's one story that will always stick in my mind. I was in the 3rd grade and we were supposed to bring back signed permission slips from our trip to the library. The only person in class who didn't bring his permission slip was a friend of mine. My 3rd grade teacher thought it'd be appropriate to interrogate him in front of the entire class as to why he didn't bring it. He responded that he would be unable to attend and she continued to press him. All of a sudden, he bursts into tears and explains that he has to attend a funeral. You'd think she'd have the brains to stop there, right? Wrong. She still has the nerve to ask, "Whose?" I'll never forget the look on his face when he replies, "My mum's." I freaking hated that teacher so much for so many other reasons too. He moved about a week after that and his father got in contact with our family, updating on their status, which wasn't exactly great. That was my worst experience. I can't imagine how hard it must have been for him. Oh gosh, this reminds me of a story. I went to a Catholic school from kindergarten through to the 6th grade. In the 3rd grade, 8, one of my friend's mothers died. Needless to say, the kid was out of school for a couple of weeks. When he finally returned, he was having a difficult time, obviously. One day during class he was crying, and our female teacher told him to stop being such a baby and that his mother was no good anyways. I recall telling my mother about it because it really disturbed me at that age. Heck, it disturbs me now. I'm sorry, Paul. I hope you're doing great. I called my teacher Mom. I then tried to correct myself and referred to her as the names of several other teachers before shutting up and trying to phase into my chair. Haha, I as well called my teacher Mom once. Luckily it was the beginning of recess and most kids were hurrying to get outside, so most of them didn't hear it. Plus I was 5, almost 6, and super tiny for my age, which according to my teacher made my mistake the cutest thing ever. She even picked me up when the rest of the kids were outside. I was so flustered by my mistake that I hadn't even moved, and she said she wished she was my mom. She was a pretty cool teacher. I feel like this happens to greater than 1/3 of students, just by this cliché's appearance in media and how often you hear about it happening in general from your friends. Had a teacher tell me I was a slacker when all I wanted to do was mind my own business. She constantly took me out into the hall because I wasn't talking as much as I should, and lectured me how I was disturbing everyone else. Even had my parents come in at one point. Sorry I was a quiet kid, lady. So you were disturbing people with your silence. Yeah, I even burst into tears at one point. I didn't know what I was doing wrong and this lady didn't let up. It scarred me. I always go with the whole, "We're worried about you. You don't ask as many questions as the other kids" thing. Of course I was quiet, and I'd always think that the reason you ask questions in class is because you don't understand something. I understood everything as a child. Turns out they just wanted me to outwardly express a bit more interest. There was this lady at my school who taught special ed, who was a typical scary-faced witch. One day she took us to indoor recess. Our normal teacher couldn't take us for some reason, and I was skipping happily like a normal child would do. She immediately scolds me and says that I can't play in recess. I had to sit in a chair in the corner of the gym while I watched all of my friends play some weird game. After the first round of the game was over, I got to go play with them because I assumed that my punishment wasn't as severe as sitting out the whole time. Nope, I was yelled at and told to sit back down. For skipping, like the happy child that I was. We had a teacher like that too. She was the special ed principal as well. She told lots of kids off for fast walking and made everyone sit for an extra 10 minutes at lunch so the owner of a chip packet would pick it up, and scolded a kid who tried to pick it up and end the madness, and had to have the principal of the regular school tell her to wear a better brassiere. She was horrible and scary. Speech therapy. The kids in my grade level were pretty cool and didn't make fun of me for having a speech impediment. I was actually well liked. I only felt different during speech therapy. Nothing felt worse than when your teacher is standing in front of the class and the speech therapist has to interrupt the lesson to take you, and only you, out of the class. This happened on a weekly basis, mind you. I say this for all school-based speech-language pathologists. I'm so sorry for ever making you feel anything less than brilliant. We think we're helping. I try to take students from the same class out at the same time to make it seem more natural. Also, I try to make the sessions interesting and rewarding, so I hardly ever have a student who doesn't want to go to speech. Unless the class is in the middle of something new and super cool, then I engage in the activity with the class for a bit until there's a better stopping time. I've actually had 2 students fake having a trouble with a certain sound just so that they could see what speech was all about. However, no one can pull students out of the classroom at random, so their adorable attempt at getting out of class went unsuccessfully. Again, sorry for any hard feelings. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. I didn't speak good English when I first moved to the US in 3rd grade. I didn't know that frick was a swear word. I used it casually. One time the teacher asked, "Who first settled the town that I live in?" I responded, "The fricking British." I got suspended for 3 days. Pro tip, before moving to another country, learn which words are offensive and don't say them to your teacher. Your suspension seems pretty harsh for a new kid. That's a solid answer though, and you should stand by it. That's hilarious. I actually did something similar in 3rd grade. Having just moved to France, I asked in a rude way if I could go and take a leak. Je peux aller pisser? Not knowing that pisser was a swear word. I didn't get suspended or anything, but everyone in the class got a good laugh out of it. Some of my friends still bring it up now, about 12 years later. This butthole kid stabbed me in the shoulder with a metal fork during a snowball fight. Who brings a knife to a snowball fight? Only a lunatic, but a fork? It's understandable. I see you've played snowy, spoony, knifey, forky before. My mother sent me to school very sick one day, and I was having a horrible time to say the least. Nauseous, fever, cough, but I couldn't stay home as she had a very important job interview, so I pretended I was a lot better than I was for her. About half an hour into school, I got this feeling in the pit of my stomach. Oh God. I proceeded to walk over to where everyone kept their backpacks, where nobody could see me, found the nearest one, and filled it with my spew. I was a dumb kid, so I looked around to make sure no one saw. The storage was around the corner from the class desks, and they were having playmat time so nobody noticed me, and I put the poor kid's backpack back on its hook. 2 hours later during lunch, I heard a scream, followed by a couple of students getting sick all over the lunchroom tables and floor. And that boy whose bag I spewed in was crying his fricking eyes out. The teacher basically interrogated the class, and I finally burst into tears and admitted it was me. I was sent to the nurse, then detention, and my mother never looked so angry with me when she picked me up. As for the kid, he didn't talk to me for 2 weeks and then told me he hated me and that my spew smelled like his cat's litter box. We started dating 8 years later, and we're still together. Ha ha ha! In this more negative story grouping, it can be quite nice to come across the odd one that has a happy ending, so thanks for that. 3rd grade, we had chair desks. Look them up. Mine had a lot of clutter under the seat, and the teacher told me to clean it before class was over. Now, I wasn't going very fast, but I didn't have much time either. The bell rang and I was still cleaning. The teacher got really angry at me. I don't remember what she said, but she was mad. Really furious. She picked up the whole desk, I fell out, and she dumps everything out of it and onto me, then throws it down. The desk slammed into the ground inches to my side. Needless to say, I was terrified by this whole thing. I told my mum told the principal, and they called the police. But I was too scared to say a word to the officers. I just bawled into my mum's arm. With nothing from me, there wasn't much they could do. At least I was moved to a different class. My 1st grade teacher also used to dump students' desks, sometimes with students still in them, out as well. She was a C-word. I'm sorry you had to experience this too. I will never understand why people like that decide to work with children if they hate them so much. Some of them just don't know they hate children until they've spent a decade teaching them. Okay, so my 1st grade teacher was a total butthead who was constantly doing things that probably should have gotten him fired, like telling the entire class that they should never be like me and using my art project as an example of what everyone shouldn't do, singling me out, openly mocking me and my family in front of class, forcing me to go to a kindergarten class so he could use me as a bad example there, among other things. I'm almost positive that he hated me. The worst thing, though, happened one day during our math time. I was in the advanced math class and had already learned what we, as a class, were doing on a worksheet. Because of this, I worked ahead and finished it before the other kids. This prompted him to take my sheet, scream at me for working ahead of the class or not paying attention, violently rip up my worksheet, throw it to the garbage, and make me start over. It was more humiliating than anything up to that point, and the only time I'd ever been punished for being smart. In conclusion, my first grade teacher was literally a walking, talking sphincter. My teacher did something similar to me in 6th grade. I went to a private Christian school that was known for being less academically advanced than the other schools in the area, and I was pretty far ahead of a lot of the people in my grade. I also had ADHD, diagnosed but untreated, so during lectures I'd get bored and quietly work ahead. The teacher caught me one day and ripped up my work in front of the class in the middle of her lecture. I told my mom and the teacher ended up getting fired, sort of a last straw deal, I guess. Good riddance. Frick you, Mrs. Myers. I remember another time I was reading after finishing my work, and she confiscated my book and made some sort of snide comment about it. She was mad that I wasn't double-checking my work. I ended up going to the principal and he got it back from me since Mrs. Myers refused to give it up until the end of the week, even though it was a library book. Oh my god, frick you, Mrs. Myers again. I had long hair in kindergarten or 1st grade, I can't quite remember, but a kid used to always tease me about it, saying I looked like a girl. I'm a dude. Anyway, I dragged him out into our little cubby space in class and gave him a haircut with safety scissors. The old ones cut hair pretty well. Got in a ton of trouble. By the way, if you lived in Las Vegas 20 years ago, and this was you, my bad. You don't lie about those scissors. When I was really young and coloring in class, I think this was in kindergarten, I was getting annoyed at my hair for falling in my face, so I just grabbed the safety scissors and gave myself bangs. According to the teacher, I did a really good job at them too. When I was a kid, I was sloppy and disorganized. It wasn't on purpose. I just for some reason felt compelled to shove papers in my desk at school rather than sort them out. I was embarrassed by it and didn't want anyone to look at my desk. Like all kids, I had a crush. My crush that year was a kid named Johnny. I wrote his name in my notebook with little hearts all around it, and it became part of the mass of crumpled up papers in my desk that I'd forgotten about. One day, in the middle of class, my evil witch of a teacher noticed that my desk was sloppy, again, and decided to embarrass me by dumping out all of the contents of my desk right in front of the entire class, and then going through all of the papers one by one and reading them out loud. Eventually, she came across the paper that had Johnny's name written on it and said, "Ah, looks like someone has a crush on Johnny," out loud to the entire class. I turned bright red and tried to take the papers out of her hand, which apparently offended her, so she told me to get my hands off her. Kids never stopped teasing me after that. I couldn't even look at Johnny without blushing and wanting to cry. Fricking hate that B-word to this day. A group of boys who were a few years older than me, I was 6 and they were 12, would relentlessly chase me around the school every lunchtime. I'd hide in the toilets until I was sure they got bored of waiting. I told teachers, but they never did anything. Honestly, I lived in fear of them all year until they left for high school. They were double my age and like 3 times my size. It was horrible. Something similar happened with my little brother. He was in the 2nd grade and these 2 5th graders were cutting in line in front of my brother and his friends. My brother, knowing this is wrong, tells the 5th grader that they can't cut in line. Somehow, one of the 5th graders decides to hit my brother, and my brother hit him back, and they started fighting until a lunch lady stopped them. They've both got a 3-day in-school suspension. If they hit you first, then you can hit them back in defense. Now that I think about it, this situation isn't that similar to yours, but oh well, I'm still sorry it happened to you. I wonder if bullying is more or less the same in the modern day and age compared to how it was when I and the writers of these posts were in school in the 90s or earlier. I can't help but feel like teachers have much stricter training on how to deal with this sort of thing in most countries now. When I was in 2nd grade, I had a crush on this one girl, and when we were on a field trip, I saw this ladybug ring for sale. I bought it knowing she liked ladybugs and waited for the right time to give it to her. I ended up doing it at the end of the field trip as we were gathering our stuff in front of her friends. She laughed in my face and refused the gift. I felt like crap and threw it out. In the 1st grade, I went to this private church school where all of the teachers were relatively strict about rules, and kids leaving class to go to the restroom among other things. One day, during singing time, I really had to go pee. I asked the teacher politely if I could use the restroom real quick and promised to be right back. The teacher told me I'd have to wait until recess to use it. Recess was right after singing time. While singing time is going on, a giant thunderstorm moves in and begins a torrential downpour, while the teacher thinks it would be a great idea for the class to sing the Rainy Day song to coincide with the storm. As the class is singing the song, I try as hard as I can not to think about how badly I need to pee and begin trying to count the grains of wood in my desk. Needless to say, it didn't help. About halfway through the Rainy Day song, and when the torrential downpour outside was at its worst, I ended up peeing my pants and creating a giant pool of pee beneath my desk. I was in tears, and when the teacher noticed what had happened, I was immediately taken down to the office to get a change of clothes. Since I was a girl and happened to be wearing a dress that day, I ended up having to wear some Polynesian top meant for a boy and boy shorts. My 4th grade teacher would always ridicule me in front of the class for not being able to learn my multiplication tables. I'm dyscalculic. I hated 4th grade so much. It was a nightmare. I crapped my pants while doing a speech in front of the class. My teacher had not one sympathetic bone in her body and treated me as if I'd punched her elderly mother in the face. I was a bathroom monitor with my friend. He took the boy one, I had the girl one, and they were obviously next to each other. We were just talking and messing around, and at one point I jokingly held his shoulders for whatever reason, and this teacher starts screaming down the hall for me to let go of him, what am I doing, etc. I also had the meanest 1st grader teacher who didn't believe that I wasn't bullying him, and kept demanding that I do to her what I did to him to prove it. I still freaking hate both of those teachers. My kindergarten teacher changed my card from green to yellow because I tugged at another girl's t-shirt to tell her that I thought it was pretty. I've got to be honest, I flipped out like SpongeBob did in that one episode where he got a good noodle star taken away. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out Easy Mode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.